Welcome to the Retain Unified Archiving Retain Archive Job Setup Guide video. I am Stefan Fassmann, and I will be your guide today. You can find the Retain documentation on our website. In this video, I will show you how to create schedules, a profile, how to set up and configure a worker, and create a job. Now that a module has been configured, an archive job may be created. A job is made up of 4 parts: schedule, profile, worker, and the job itself. The schedule defines when the job runs. The profile defines what the job archives. The worker defines where the job connects to. The job defines who to archive. Open schedules. This is the when of a job. Press Add Schedule. There are 2 kinds of schedules, single and recurring. A single schedule fires at a particular date and time. This is useful for a troubleshooting job. I like to call it now, because that's generally when I need it to run. Press Save Changes to save this schedule. A recurring schedule will fire the same time on every day that it's enabled on. I like to call this the daily schedule and run it every day. I like to have this job run after midnight but before work, so if there are errors, going through the logs is easier. It's annoying to troubleshoot an error when the log is split across days. Press Save Changes to save this schedule. Open Profiles. This is the what to archive of a job. Press Add Profile. I like to call the profile used for standard operations normal. Here you can disable all jobs that share this profile. If you want to disable all jobs for a module, you can do that in the module. If you just want to disable a single job, do that in that particular job. Under the Message Settings tab, here you can set what kind of messages to archive. You want everything. Otherwise, you will suffer data loss. That's never fun. Scope tab. Here you can set what date range to archive. Don't Advance Timestamp is useful during troubleshooting, but generally this should be disabled. There are a number of date ranges that can be used. New items. Retain saves a timestamp in the database about when it scanned a mailbox and uses that to start the job, -1 hour. Mostly you want to use this option. On an initial dredge, everything is new to Retain, so everything will be archived. All items in mailbox. The job will start from the beginning of Unix time, midnight January 1st, 1970, and grabs everything. This tends to take a long time. Number of days before job start data, and newer. The job starts the set number of days ago and comes to the current time. Number of days from job start date and older. The job starts at the beginning of time and ends the set number of days ago. Specific custom date range. Set an absolute date range to archive between. Specify custom date range relative to job start. The dredge is limited to between a certain number of days ago. From should be smaller than 2. For example, 7 to 21 days ago will archive items that came in 2 to 3 weeks ago, ignoring anything that came in the last week. Miscellaneous tab. You will want to store all attachments. If you don't, you will suffer data loss. You don't want that. Store and index the Internet headers. Some of this depends on the module that is configured, but it is mostly just nomenclature differences. This example uses the Exchange module. Include the user's archive mailbox. Even if that is not active, I like turning it on in case that is activated later. Include the user's recoverable items. This option is vital because if you have set the rolling in place hold, even purged items will be kept in the recoverable items folder. Include public folders. This is best set to none or owned by mailbox, as unless the impersonation user has rights to the public mailbox, Exchange will not serve it to the impersonation user because it is not the owning user. If you are using journaling mailboxes, which Microsoft does not recommend, you can set how they are organized here. The Advanced tab. Just stay away from this tab. This will do exactly what you tell it to, and that's rarely what you actually want. Support has received so many calls where customers have lost data, and it's almost always because they had some advanced rule enabled, and it worked exactly like they set it up, and they excluded important data. Do yourself a favor and archive everything. Press Save Changes. Now to the worker. Okay, this is where things get a little complicated. In Retain, the word worker is overloaded, referring to more than one thing. The worker is made up of two parts, the agent software that you install on a server and the web object to tell the agent how to connect to the Retain server, and the module tells the worker to connect to Exchange. The worker is the connection between the messaging server, in this case Exchange, and the Retain server. Essentially, the Retain worker handles the business of dredging the data from Exchange, while the server handles the business of storing the data in the archive database and index. If you remember from the installation video, we installed a copy of the worker agent on the Retain server. That is a convenient choice, but may not always be the best choice. The worker agent can be installed in three places: on the Retain server, on a dedicated worker server, or on the Exchange server. There are advantages and disadvantages to each. With a worker agent on the Retain server, that means that each and every message must be sent from the messaging server across the network to the worker before they can be checked if they already exist in the archive. If network performance is your highest priority, you should place a worker on the mailbox database server, because we have found approximately 20% of messages are duplicates, and that bandwidth can be saved by placing the worker on the email server. This way, the worker can only send the hash of the message, which is very small to check if the message exists. If throughput volume is important, you can install multiple workers. You can place one on each mailbox server, or on one or more dedicated worker servers. This is handy because we recommend having one worker per mailbox database and running jobs in parallel. A worker can only run a single job at a time, and this way you can have the ability to archive multiple mailbox databases at the same time by running workers in parallel. Let's configure the worker. The first thing we need to do is to create a bootstrap so the worker agent knows how to communicate with the Retain server. The worker web object is created in the Retain server console. You provide it with a name. This will show up as the friendly name in the worker web console. For this demonstration, I will use worker0. If the worker agent is on a different server, make the name descriptive enough so you can find the worker agent in a few years. Polling tab. The defaults are fine. The update status is how often the job status tab of the job is updated. This is different from the worker page, which we'll discuss later. Logging tab. Logging should be enabled, set to diagnostic level. That way we won't have to recreate the issue by running the job again. Compressing the logs is a great idea as they are text files and they will compress by more than 80%. Removing old logs is recommended, and you can set after how many days it will remove the old logs. Connection tab. This is the connection back to the Retain server. It should already be filled in. Module specific tab. There may be times you want the worker to use a different Active Directory server than the one listed in the module. That can be listed here. This would be of use when the mailbox server is in one city and the Active Directory server is in another city. Press Save and you will be taken to a new tab, the Bootstrap tab. Here you can download the Bootstrap for the worker agent. Download the Bootstrap file. Now that we have the worker Bootstrap, we need to upload it to the worker agent. Open your browser to the retain worker. In this case, it is on the same server as the retain server, so we can enter the URL with retain worker, capital R and capital W. This opens the retain worker agent bootstrap upload page. Browse to the file location and upload the file. The configuration tab shows us the friendly name of the worker, which matches the name we saved into the bootstrap. The URI to the retain server is what it is using to connect to the retain server. It also shows the version of the software it is using. The Server Connection tab tells us if the connection is successful. The Status tab shows us the status of the current and previous jobs. It is blank right now. Schedule tab. You can click through to see the next upcoming scheduled jobs, but we have not finished creating a job yet, so this won't have anything of use. Finally, we are ready to configure a job. Under the Core Settings tab, give it a descriptive name like Daily. Make sure the job is enabled. This only disables this particular job. Choose a schedule, now. Choose a profile, Daily. Choose a worker, Worker 0. If you are using journaling, you would enable that under the Journaling tab and provide the mailbox that is receiving all of the messages. Mailboxes tab. This is the Who to Archive part. You can select the mail server or just an individual mailbox database. You may include or exclude by distribution list, or include or exclude individual users. Notifications tab. Retain communicates via email. By default, this uses the information given to Retain when Retain was configured. You can change it here under the Notification tab. Additional addresses can be added with a comma. Make sure someone is monitoring this address. The error email will be sent on each individual error, so it can be overwhelming if there are many errors. At the very least, send the summary email. The Status tab will show current, last, and overall information, but we have to run a job first. Press Save Changes. We can set the schedule to daily and the jobs will begin, but I'll show you how to manually start a job. Go to Schedules and select the single schedule. Set the time to the past. A minute is enough. Browse to the Worker Agent console. Click the Refresh Job Cache Now button. Under the Status tab, we can watch the job start. We can go back to the Job Status tab and see the data there. The job will also appear in Reporting. The next step is finding data in Retain.